UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson has resigned today. Let's watch.
Thank you. It is clearly now the will of the Parliamentary Conservative Party that there should be a new leader of that party and therefore a new Prime Minister. And I've agreed with Sir Graham Brady, the chairman of our backbench MPs, that the process of choosing that new leader should begin now. And the timetable will be announced next week. And I've today appointed a cabinet to serve, as I will, until a new leader is in place. So I want to say to the millions of people who voted for us in 2019, many of them voting Conservative for the first time, thank you for that incredible mandate, the biggest Conservative majority since 1987, the biggest share of the vote since 1979. And the reason I have fought so hard in the last few days to continue to deliver that mandate in person was not just because I wanted to do so, but because I felt it was my job, my duty, my obligation to you to continue to do what we promised in 2019.
White House columnist for The Hill and News Nation correspondent Niall Stanage is here with us to discuss. Welcome, Niall.
Good to be here.
It's great to have you. So tell us more about this scandal that I think was the reason Johnson ultimately had to resign.
Yeah, it's a fascinating scandal and the latest in a long string of scandals that has sort of bedeviled Boris Johnson. In this instance, it comes down to a character called Chris Pincher, who resigned roughly a week ago after allegations came out that he had groped men at a party. And he said he had embarrassed himself and he resigned. Now, the question then is, what was Boris Johnson's knowledge of previous allegations against this man? Initially, Johnson said that he didn't know there had been any previous allegations. Then that explanation began to shift. He started talking about the fact that he didn't know the specifics. That was again contradicted, and ultimately Boris Johnson landed on the explanation that he may have been told but he had forgotten. That was not persuasive even to members of his own party, and so here we are.
Wow. And my understanding is that there was also some frustration with the Conservative government for related or semi-related, I guess in the same category of scandal, parties or events that were held during the kind of most lockdown period, and yet there was some social gathering. And I've been very critical of sort of lockdown rules, but the idea being that the government was requiring these strict lockdowns on social gatherings, but then they were actually hosting some parties. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was really the turning point for Boris Johnson. That was when the tide turned, partly because he had presented himself very much as a populist himself. Then what happened was his government enacted these restrictions. There were fairly serious restrictions on your ability to attend any kind of social gatherings. And it emerged that Johnson himself had broken the rules. He was actually fined by the police, albeit the modest sum of £50 for his conduct. But really, I think the hypocrisy was the issue there. Once that scandal emerged, then quite understandably, you had members of the British public come out and say, we weren't able to go in and visit my grandmother when she was dying, or we weren't able to attend a funeral or a wedding.
But here you are partying.
Yeah, meanwhile they were doing their own thing. And so that element of double standards, I think, was very politically damaging.
That's impressive, honestly. I mean, this level of thing, that the fact that this resulted in his resignation, that the people were so outraged and called out this hypocrisy, and they were actually able to get rid of him for that. I don't think that would happen in America.
Yeah, I think we were talking about this. It is literally foreign, but seems foreign to us because this kind of thing would not necessarily sink a U.S. political figure in this day and age.
It only might last a couple of days in the news.
Right, there would be so much covering for the figure by their own political tribe and by their loyalists and whatever media tribe is their ally. What is the different dynamic in the UK, whereas there actually is a lot of holding your own, or more so holding your own side's person accountable?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few important components to that, and I think it's a great question. One is that while media in the UK, of course, has some ideological cross currents within it, you don't really have networks waving the flag for a particular party or a particular cause in the way that they do here. As to the specifics of the dynamics with Boris Johnson and his own party, The fact that it's a parliamentary system does change a lot. I mean, Boris Johnson is Prime Minister because he's the leader of the Conservative Party.
Right.
And if the Conservative Party changes its leader, as they're about to do, a different person becomes Prime Minister. And we've seen this play out a lot. It's not at all unique to Boris Johnson. Theresa May, his predecessor, was removed in similar circumstances. Margaret Thatcher, who had won 3 general elections, was removed in broadly similar circumstances. And just one final point that I'd mention, in Britain as in America, of course politicians are concerned about their own survival and their own political fortunes. The Conservatives had lost recently a couple of what in Britain are called by-elections. We would call them special elections, including one that had been in a very safe Conservative seat. So I think then Conservative MPs saw the writing on the wall to some degree.
So they see that Johnson has become a liability, and that this could make the party, this could stop losses, this could make the party more popular if they deal with this internally and have a new leader. That's what you're saying.
That's the theory. Now, Boris Johnson's loyalists would argue that he has actually been an effective vote winner for all his other foibles and idiosyncrasies. And in fact, in the clip that you mentioned, he talked about his mandate, which was a reference to the 2019 general election. At that time, he had just taken over from Theresa May. There was a general election held, and the Conservatives won a thumping majority in that election.
But like you said, there's been a series of scandals, right? So they didn't just decide to do this out of thin air. This is the result of watching, the tides are turning. It seems like they made a pretty strong strategical move, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you make a good point that it really wasn't this scandal in isolation. I mean, if Boris Johnson had been sailing along, peacefully and in a strong political position, then something like this probably wouldn't have led to his resignation. But you do get this accretion of scandals with him, and that has ultimately proven politically fatal.
Any idea about who has the inside track to be his replacement?
It's going to be a fascinating process. I mean, Liz Truss, the Foreign Secretary, is one name that I've heard. Penny Mordaunt, who used to be Defence Secretary, would be more of a compromise choice. We should say, without getting too deep into the weeds of it, this is quite a complicated process. It goes first to Conservative MPs and then goes out to the Conservative Party membership in the country.
Wow, well, color me impressed.
You're just impressed that someone was held accountable.
I'm so impressed. I love it. I'm like, this is how they doing it over there.
Sure.
So this will be going on for a while, is what you're saying. We won't have a new Prime Minister tomorrow.
We won't. Approximately 6 weeks is the general rule of thumb.
Okay. Well, Niall, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Good to be here.
And we'll have more Rising right after this. Stay with us.